I'm asking, does Joe Biden pose a risk to global security? Now, in a pair of dramatic gaffes that could further fuel the crisis surrounding his presidency, Joe Biden mistakenly referred to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as President Putin and astonishingly called Vice President Kamala Harris Vice President Trump. Let's have a listen.
Ukraine will prevail in this war, and we'll stand with them every single step of the way. That's what the compact says, loudly and clearly. And now I want to hand it over to the President of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. He's going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin.
I mean, there's a picture of Joe Zelensky's face, and he's laughing. And let's take another listen to this one.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there.
Now, you'd think that he would have worked out that that was quite, I don't know. These blunders made on the global stage at an international summit come amongst growing concern about Joe Biden's age and mental acuity. Now, I'm actually not that concerned about his age. It's more his mental ability. And critics are intensifying their calls for him to step down. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, does Joe Biden pose a risk to global security? Well, I'm joined to discuss this, Vice Chair of the External Relations for Republicans Overseas, Erol Morkoc, and also a political operative in Californian Democratic Party, Bob Mulholland. All right, I'm just going to start with you. Bob Mulholland, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, do you think he's a risk now?
No, it was Trump that said several months ago that if he was in president and some country like Poland didn't get to that 2%, then Trump would send the message to Russia, go ahead and invade Poland. That's an attack, and it was an irresponsible remark. But I also want to add, as a wounded veteran from Vietnam, I found your remarks, I'm a big fan of Invictus, a little hurtful to wounded veterans. And so I'll just get that off the table right away. But Biden was born stuttering problem, so he's had that problem all his life. Now, Trump a couple months ago couldn't remember the name of his wife, so let's get that on the record also. And also I want to tell you that when Trump was in the White House, his own doctor publicly announced he is obese. In other words, heading to diabetes, and once you've got diabetes, you're more likely to have a stroke. So it's interesting, as the Republicans keep talking about Biden, actually maybe their guy that may not make it to November 5th. How about that?
No, come on, Bob. Be honest. How can you continue to say this when it is quite clear this is not just one of his gaffes? I mean, this is just two in the space of a few days, and that's not even the whole of it. I mean, I could have a litany of gags and mistakes that he's made, and I get it, yeah, but it would literally, it would not be like this, Bob. What are you in denial of? What are you in denial of?
What's your point here?
Well, the question. Well, 81 though.
The nominees of their parties.
It's not about the age. It's not about the age. You're asking me a question. Hang on, stop, Bob. You're asking me a question, and then as soon as I start speaking, you start talking. Do you actually want me to answer any of these, or is it just you're just going to talk as soon as I speak? You asked me what the point is. What is my? Here we go again. Let's bring in Erol. Erol, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a simple question at first, but it actually begs a deeper unpacking, because at face value, the answer at first would be no. Joe Biden should be surrounded by competent people. The security should be managed by the Secretary of Defense and the U.S. military, the greatest military on earth. But the fact of the matter when you step back is that, hang on a second, who has Joe Biden actually appointed or surrounded himself with? Secretary Lloyd Austin, he's been incredibly incompetent in the botched Afghanistan withdrawal. You look at Kamala Harris, not somebody who anybody has any confidence in. You look at the Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. These kind of people all dropped the ball. So yes, now it does present a security risk because Joe Biden isn't capable of running the ship by himself. Now, the United States political apparatus is bigger than one man. It's not to say that one man creates dysfunction, but if you look at history, if you look at the fall of the Ottoman Empire, for example, or the Austro-Hungarian Empire, oftentimes the lack of power vacuum at the top is what allows subordinates then to come in and play an outsized role. And that's something that President Trump never did. He always made sure the executive branch was the executive branch. So Joe Biden's inability to lead, an inability to be a strong leader, has led this country now into a position of being perceived as a weaker country. Our adversaries in China, in Russia, around the world, Iran, they laugh at us. They realize that this is the time to take advantage of the United States. So, of course, no. The answer should be no. It should be that Joe Biden is surrounded by talented people and the U.S. military will protect us. But the fact of the matter is that hasn't been how it's been. And so it looks like to most Americans and to people on the outside that Joe Biden isn't qualified not only to be president, but he's certainly not somebody who's keeping our country safe. And as far as national security, this isn't the time. You know, there's times of general peace, and that's when you can have an incompetent, bumbling fool as a president. But in times of war, when we're on the precipice of potentially a World War III type situation, when you have trench warfare in Europe, yes, it has created an incredible power vacuum. And who's going to fill that power vacuum? Which one of our allies has the military might to step up, and which world leader has the ability to step up? Right now, it's not clear. Without President Trump, I think that we're headed into a very dangerous situation.
Bob Mulholland, what would you say to that?
Well, I found it funny that the Republicans said it was talking about the Biden cabinet. Well, it was the Trump cabinet that he hired as the best in the world, and then he fired them all, saying the most incompetent general, the most incompetent cabinet secretary, on and on and on. This is a race that we need to protect national security for Americans, and that's why President Biden will work with NATO. Trump said he'll remove America from NATO. Good luck to Europe. It was Americans, over 600,000 troops, that died saving Europe in World War I and World War II. And on Afghanistan, let me make a point. In 2016, Trump promised the American people he'd be out of Afghanistan within months. And Trump dithered for 4 months and signed a one-sided treaty with the Taliban terrorists. And that was Trump's failure. Afghanistan was supposed to be over in 2017, and Trump was so weak and so, maybe because of all the girlfriends he has from California. Incidentally, Trump loves California.
So what about the Joe Biden and the withdrawal from Afghanistan, Bob? That was a disaster.
But you can blame Trump, and we will in the campaign.
But the way it was done. But the way it was done, you can blame Trump for withdrawing if you want, but not for the way it was done.
Because Trump had a nice deal with the Taliban terrorists that there would be a TSA, American traffic at an airport, to leave, in my case, was leave Vietnam, which was a mess. I don't know why anybody thinks that when Trump signed that one-sided Taliban treaty, that we would just get on TWA or United Airlines and flight attendants would be there. Of course it would be messy because of Trump's failure with the Taliban.
But Bob, Joe Biden was in charge of that. Erol, Joe Biden was in charge of that. Final word to you.
Thank you. No, excuse me. Yeah, Donald Trump made a deal with the Taliban to have an exit from Afghanistan, which everybody in this country wanted. I'm sure yourself included, myself. Now, that deal said that if you touch one hair of any American head, I will kill you, to the leader of the Taliban. And he showed him a picture of his house, and he walked out of the room. Not a single American life was touched. Then, unfortunately, we lost that election. Now, Joe Biden had ample time to put together a withdrawal plan. What did they do? They put together an imbecilic plan to leave from the center of Baghdad. They didn't use the air bases we had. This is on President Biden. He was the president. His Secretary of Defense was the one leading this, and when you saw bodies in the wheel well and people clamoring, this was worse than the evacuation of Saigon. This was a disgrace to the American people. We had American soldiers who lost their lives due to Joe Biden's incompetence. The idea that you think President Trump, who was not president at the time, was responsible for that is straight up propaganda. It's not a serious
Okay, so listen, I've got to go so I'm not really time for a long response, but very briefly then, I'm going to ask you, Bob, just in a few words, Bob, do you think then that Joe Biden is a risk to global security, yes or no?
Trump is, and England will win on Sunday.
But what about Joe Biden, yes or no? Is he a risk to global security?
Trump is is the problem with American.
No, but what about Joe Biden? Yes or
Biden is not. Hey,
So-
why didn't Trump get out of Afghanistan?
Okay, no,
in
but I'm just
2017?
asking you with regard to Joe Biden. Is Joe Biden a risk to global security? Yes or no?
Absolutely not. Trump
No.
is.
Okay, and also Errol, yes or no? Is Joe Biden a risk?
Yes, absolutely, unequivocally a huge danger.
Listen, it's been a pleasure to talk to you both. Thank you so much for your views. Bob Mulholland, thank you very much. And also Erol Morkoc, thank you. Right, well, what do you think? gbnews.com/your say. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Aquin.